If you have any
One
questions in
question.
this, I'll,
Yeah,
yeah,
I have
yeah,
one
that's where
question.
I'm coming. Yeah,
Yeah, this
please go ahead.
platform, suppose there are multiple projects happening in various technologies, right?
Mm,
Like I say, like in SAP, there is a platform on SAP, then you have on
mm,
SharePoint, then you have on RPA. So,
mm,
and even on Azure also, like your data
mm,
pipelines are there. So how
mm.
do we manage all this on this Azure? Is it necessary that all systems needs to be connected because of the source data to be updated or as a repository can keep? How is it generally played like?
Make sure the projects whichever is working must be having a DevOps team. That is required.
Uh-huh.
Because if they are not operating on DevOps practices, for
Uh,
example, if team is not into DevOps environment, right? For example, there is no DevOps team as such, then Azure
uh-huh.
DevOps will not be having any use for that projects. You can go for
No, I
regular
did not get
regular
that actually.
implementation, right?
No, I didn't get that because see, we have different platforms, right?
Okay.
Now, for different platforms, if for DevOps, is
Hmm.
it logical enough to go for it? Like I said, no, like SAP is there, then you have SharePoint,
Yes.
you have an RPA, then Power
Yes.
BI,
You are talking
then
about
you have
technicalities. Technicalities.
yeah, technicalities. Like, see, I have
Technicalities
many
of the
projects
project.
going on.
Hmm.
So I have many projects going on.
Hmm.
Suppose I need to have DevOps in this particular setup. So
Oh.
should I logically go for all the projects which I am saying here, or it should be only aligned to the Microsoft projects? How is it? Like it is platform
Nine,
independent?
nine, nine. Yeah. See,
Uh-huh.
see. As far as my understanding, provide me if I'm wrong, right? So correct me if
Uh-huh.
I'm wrong. What my understanding is, for example,
Uh-huh.
there were four projects running on different technologies, right?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
all these four technologies can we integrate together in Azure DevOps or not? I think this
Yes,
is your
that is
question.
the first
If I'm
question.
not
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Right? This is what your question is. But point to
Yes.
be noted here is make sure whatever the projects you have taken, either four projects or five, whatever it is, they should adopt DevOps principles and practices first. If they
So
don't
this
adopt
DevOps
principles and
principle and
practices
practice means the one which you're saying about the backlog, this and all, or anything other than that is there?
nine, 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 nine. See, principles and practices are not something like sprint backlog or sprint
Uh,
reviews, boards, all that stuff. Because that is
uh,
quite common even in Jira also.
yeah.
Because principles and practices of DevOps, which is something relating to the technicalities of the project. For example, you are
Okay.
working
The
on
setup.
SAP and all that, right?
Okay.
Now, for example, you are not using you simply not you. I'm saying generally. For
Uh,
example,
uh,
you guys are saying that we are using DevOps environment, and there were no tool, no integration tools you are using. For example,
yeah.
no Jenkins, nothing. Then
Mm.
these Azure DevOps board doesn't have any use for that.
Okay.
Why? Because you want to use some deployment, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
deployment purposes, even for integration purposes and all everything, this DevOps environment is being used. As long as if you are not integrating those tools in real environment for all the projects, whichever the projects and how many projects those are, so this Azure DevOps doesn't have any use. You can use it for
Okay.
regular purposes itself. You don't need to integrate.
So if you have a platform wherein the deployments can be automated, I think that is where the DevOps will help you.
Yes, because it's there. It is very simple, Anil.
Yeah.
You are in the deployment side. You are in the
Uh,
deployment side. So
yeah.
you and your team are deployment experts. You are
Okay.
responsible to deploy the application. Whatever the work
Mm.
was completed, you are responsible to deploy that.
Mm.
So for that deployment procedure steps and all everything, you write. For every project, there are some deployment steps and procedures will be written by you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And those deployment procedures will be implemented on the system and they make sure whether it is working according to the right requirements of the customer or not. This is what deployment being a person, you do it.
Okay.
Now, when you have a coordination with your development team, because development team as well as DevOps team should have a proper coordination. Okay.
Okay.
In the
Mm.
earlier days, what used to happen, what developer used to develop and what is there in the mind of a developer only knows.
Absolutely.
What deployment person used to work and what is there in their mind, deployment people only knows that. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a constant tussle between these two things. That's how
Okay.
earlier the situation was, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
how generally the situation earlier was. So due to that, what will happen? There will be a communication gap comes.
Mm-hmm.
There will be a communication gap which will be erased. When
Okay.
communication gap will arise, for example, if there is any changes in requirements taken place, let's say there were a couple of requirements which was added by the customer. Due to the requirements which were added, you might require to add some technical infrastructure to that. For example, some new technology need to be introduced in the middle of the project. What will happen now? You have to change the whole system, right? You need to
Mm-hmm.
make some corrections in the whole system. That system itself takes a lot of effort to make to do it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Right or not? So because there will be database design team will be there, right? So architects are there, technical team, developers, testing team, user interface designers, lot of people are involved. So when
Yeah.
there are any requirements which are changing, within no time this process has to be continued. Means requirements comes that has to be implemented into, into a condition. So in the existing traditional model, you don't have a provision. So
Mm-hmm.
because in DevOps, what the advantage is that there are tools we are using. For example, Jenkins is a tool. Jenkins is a tool which is used for integration purpose. I'll tell you the example. For
Mm-hmm.
example, you are working on a project where there's today some Java code was written by your team, some piece of Java code.
Mm-hmm.
Second, some piece of HTML code was written by some user interface design team.
Mm-hmm.
Some database related, some work when done by the database designers because 100% work won't be done on a single day, right? Usually, some piece of work, some XYZ work was done. Now, all this information has to be stored in some repository. Where do you store that? This is
Yeah.
where generally Jenkins come into picture.
Okay.
So Jenkins is a kind of integration tool which is used to integrate the code. Whatever the code are we going to use to integrate that, generally Jenkins is what generally is being used.
What is the
Did
spelling
you
of that?
understand? Jenkins. I'll write down here. Jenkins.
Okay.
Did you understand this? Right?
Yeah.
Jenkins. Right? So Jenkins is a tool which is used to integrate the code. Whatever the code we have taken, that code integration will be comes under Jenkins. Did you understand this? Right?
Yeah.
This is what Jenkins is. Like this, there is another tool called Kubernetes. Right?
Yeah.
There is another tool called Kubernetes. Right? So next, we have Negois and Ansible. Right? So these are the different tools which are under DevOps environment. Now coming back to the question, right? What is that you have asked?
Yeah.
When you are working on four different technologies, right? As I already
Yes.
mentioned earlier, DevOps is not a technology. DevOps is an environment.
Platform.
Platform. Yeah, okay. Platform. DevOps is a platform or an environment.
Yeah.
Where in this environment and platform, all the people collectively work. Even development team, deployment team will work together.
So it helps
So
in
how they work?
collaborating between them. Yeah.
Yes, development team and operations team. It
Yeah.
helps in collaborating development team and operations team. This is what generally this DevOps environment is being used.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you do that? Is there any process to follow that? For that, there are some technologies which people have to use.
Okay.
People should use some technologies, right? So these technologies were nothing but something like, as I told you, technologies like Jenkins and all, everything is being used. At the same time, even for Kubernetes and all, everything will be used here because Kubernetes is also one of the one which will be used to automate the tasks, right? So even for container management. At the
So
same time,
from
if you
these,
want to
which
build
are
any
the
container,
open source tools? Yeah.
sorry.
No, from the ones which you have written, the deployment
Hmm.
tools, which are open source
Hmm.
out of the,
Kubernetes, you can use it.
that is an
Kubernetes,
open
you can
source, right?
use. Yeah, you can use it. Open source system. It's an open source system.
The others are
Kubernetes.
actually proprietary, is it? Others?
Some are proprietary, not everything.
Okay.
because some are proprietary, not everything. Because normally some Jenkins and all everything you see, even Jenkins is also an open source one.
I see.
Yeah, so this is normally
Hey,
used for building.
why I'm asking is because
Mm,
there are
mm.
certain constraints in the organization where, because of security reasons, no, they discourage
They
open
don't
source for
allow.
some.
Yes, yes.
So that's
Yeah,
why I
for
was
some
just
reason.
asking.
True, 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 true.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the reason. You pointed a valid question. The reason why most of the organizations to implement DevOps environment have these security constraints to them. Because
yeah,
open source software, of course open source has its own strengthness. I do
yeah,
agree it, but some organizations may feel reluctant to use open source tools, right? So rather than
yeah,
that, they always preferable to go licensed version because they have more security over that, right? That's what
yeah.
generally people will think of. So that is also one of the obstacle where DevOps environment 100% why it is not being utilized, because this is also reason, especially
Okay.
for the organizations something relating to healthcare, banking and financial services. If you see these organizations, so they are, I
Yeah,
don't say they are reluctant to use the DevOps environment, but they will be hesitant to use different tools in regular intervals because they don't really come up with to use these tools and all effectively normally they don't,
yeah.
right? So they'll be taking some what we call
Because there are liabilities attached to it. No, if there is any
yes,
lapse happening, then the damages will have to be bared.
yes,
They will have to
yes,
pay for it.
yes, because see what will happen, this DevOps environment is a CI/CD process, we call it as.
Mm-hmm.
We call it as
Integrated.
generally it's a CI/CD process, continuous
Mm.
development and integration, which will be taken place. You're developing something, integrating, deploying it, and delivering
Mm.
it. Right. So as long as changes you are doing, you have to make the changes in instant effort, where you are integrating it, or deploying and delivering it to the customer in regular intervals. That's how generally this CI/CD concept of DevOps and all everything is being used in real environment.
Okay.
So that's the reason why there is a constant, I don't say discussion, but some people depends on their company policy, depends on their organizational
Yeah.
interest, right? At the same time, the type of organization it belongs to, because some are private companies, private organizations. Some organizations have a legacy system, some have mainframe systems we're using for a very long time, especially, right? So
Yeah.
government related systems will be there. Those are very niche tool. Niche, for example, you remember, you might be
Yeah.
knowing it, right? So there are
Yeah. Yeah.
some mainframe systems used to be there. Lotus 123, Domino
Yeah.
server, right? So there were, so those because now of course unfortunately we don't get people for that, but they are the legacy systems they
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
using for a very long time, right? So they are long time.
Absolutely.
So even integration also is difficult because the systems were so assembly level, low level programming related applications. Those were. That's the reason
Mm.
if you see more of those organizations, they write programming something like C, C++, V, C++, all that even till today. You can see
Mm. And
Photon,
even there are
Pascal,
people who are doing an.
Photon, Pascal also.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So the connectivity integration have some limitations due to various reasons. So that's the
Yeah.
reason why especially open source tools has an advantage nowadays in the industry. As
Mm.
equally it has some I don't say reluctanciness, but they have their own policies which then generally, that's the reason why
Yeah.
whenever you are developing an application, of course you are in from manufacturing industry, you might have been knowing it. For example, if you are expecting some vendor to develop your application, not only you, I'm talking
Yeah.
about general condition, right? For example, your organizations will make a note of it whenever you are preparing RFPs and all that, right? Request for proposals and all. You will be mentioning that point that must software must be a licensed one, right? There won't
Yes.
be any kind of open source tools are allowed to use, right? So because
Correct.
open source tools are costless, right? Because there is
Mm.
no cost is involved in it. Point number one.
Yeah.
And second is that, of course, it is beneficial. Just because of open source, even end user can also use it effectively. But people, every organization have their own
Yeah, see,
policies.
the basic problem there, what happens is like with open source, if you don't have a agency or somebody who can support during the vulnerabilities being
You will be stuck.
reported,
You will be
so
stuck.
that is the reason liability supposed to pay for that
Yes,
if
yes,
at all something
yes,
goes wrong. So you have to
yes,
on high priority, you have to plug them and then redeploy
yes,
them. So all
yes,
these are
yes,
very
yes.
critical things.
Yes, yes, yes. Because especially in open source tools, the major disadvantage, I don't say disadvantage, the major difficulties, even open source tools, there are a lot of open source tools are available in on online. Okay.
Yes,
As far as the learning purpose, no problem. See, if you are
correct.
learning yourself, or as for example, I am a coach, I am taking
Hmm.
coaches, coaching and all everything. For me, it is doesn't have any problem. But
Right.
when I'm implementing this in my project, if, as I told
Yeah.
you, if there is any kind of technical difficulty happened in to address that, if you have not found the right person or the right choice to address this problem and all everything, then the work whichever you have done and all everything will be stuck and halted for a
Yes.
long time. So it is difficult for the team to manage all this
Yeah.
again, because you have to come back and you have to start from the beginning, right? So that's not so
Absolutely.
easy to perform. So these are the technical difficulties which usually we faces when we are working on the uh,
Mm.
when we are working on these, right? So this is where generally this then so that's the reason why it has its own challenges, all that stuff. That's what it
Yeah.
is, right? Right. Yeah, I hope you understood. Any questions on this
Yes.
regard?
No, that's it. I understood it.
Right. So this is what it was. Now, right. So I'm taking what is that I'm going to take is from today onwards. So this is an overall idea about the Azure DevOps. What is that I have given? In order to have a discipline understanding about this total tool of DevOps, Azure DevOps, right from the inception level, it's better I'll take some project. Okay, I'll take some project. We will implement that project here. Okay, we will start
Yeah.
working on that project so that you will be knowing, you also can understand the discipline of like how to work all that stuff and all. At the same
Yeah.
time here, before I'm getting into that, I'll show you, this is where generally this project settings comes. I'll show you 1 minute. Yeah, here you can see there is an option called project settings. If you want to make any kind of project settings to the team and all, you can do it, right? For example, if you want to do any configurations for the team, or if you want to add team, for example, there are different people are involved in your project, right? So different team members are there, right? If you want to add new team and all, here you have an option. First of all, you need to add your people to that. So whenever you are
Okay.
adding people, so that people can see the kind of activities which are performing in the project. For example,
Mm.
there were some new requirements which were added to that, new tasks were added, right? There are new sprints which were created. At the same time, for example, there was some meeting conducted, right? Some meeting were held, and there were some agenda points were discussed, and we have came to a conclusion on some note. So all these things and all everything can be added to the existing. So teams should also integrate with this Azure DevOps, right? So that
I
is where
see.
generally this teams and all everything is being used. Wherein here you
Okay.
can see, you can click on the new team. You have to create a team followed by the members. You need to add the members. For example, uh, I'm just quoting one example here. Okay,
Yeah.
just this is the member, right? Of course, Illinois Trainings is what mine is, right? So Illinois Trainings at gmail.com is the member, right? So where you have to add these people to the existing one by giving the team name. For example,
Okay.
I'm not creating it. I'm just showing you. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
not creating. XYZ is the name which the name for the team which is given. So wherein members like trainings at gmail.com is the member. Like this, we can add members. You can write down the description. Administrator is Raj Elnay because I was the person who has created this project. Hence, I'll be the administrator. And if you can click on it, what will happen? There will be a message going to this Gmail account, right? So
Mm.
they will receive that. So they have to accept. Whenever they have accepted, automatically they will be a member for the team. So first of
Okay.
all, you have to invite people. When they once the invitation sent, If they have accepted, they'll be a part of the team, so that you can
Mm.
create a new team for your project and you can manage your works accordingly. That is how generally these teams and all everything is being worked for, right? So this is this because these project settings are important, because
Yeah.
see, usually what many people do is that they know how to work on Azure DevOps on a front end basis, okay,
Okay.
but to perform the activities there are some settings which you have to do in back to that, some
Okay.
settings, right? For example, I'll give you an example to you. There are multiple epics. There are multiple epics. Each and every epic have four user stories or three, something like two or whatever it is. Now there is a rule you have to write. What is the project rule? Especially the project rule is that if these user stories were completed, automatically the epic has to cancel, right?
Mm.
Right? For
Yeah.
example, in one epic there were three user stories. If three user stories were completed in any main, in any sprint, automatically the epic has to be cancelled.
Mm.
This is the condition you have to write under the project rule. If you don't
Okay.
write this, what will happen? That has to be done by the team manually. How is it possible? Because see, for the training purpose, I may be taking 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40. That's it, right? 40 tasks, right? I can't take more than. But whereas when you are
Yeah.
working on the project, there are a lot of
Task. Yeah.
issues are involved in it, right? So there are some tasks which can't be done manually. Point number one,
Okay.
right? Why settings required? I'll tell you. Point number one. Point number two. When you talk about permissions, here you can see there is an option called permissions. For example, I
Mm.
was the administrator, right? To configure the project, even to provide accessibility and all everything. I am the only person who is responsible for that. Right now, I have taken leave for 2 days, 2 days or 3 days due to my personal work, or wherein I have to go outside, wherein I have taken 2 3 days of leave. Right, I was on leave. On behalf of me, who has to taken care of this? There
Okay.
must be someone who should work as a proxy, as an administrator for few days. Right?
Mm.
Who will be that person?
Okay. So
Right?
you
So we
can
have to
assign.
provide permissions also. Right? You need to assign
Okay.
permissions to those people. That's required. So these permissions may be for different reasons. Either it may be for configurations. Configurations normally we don't allow, because configurations will be done only by the administrator. Whoever is the administrator, those they themselves will only do the configurations. But
Mm.
add and deletes, add-ons and deletes, because add-on deletes are the regular activities, right? So adding some
Yeah.
new things, deleting. I'm talking about tasks, user stories, all that
Yeah.
stuff I'm talking about. So for that, you require some administrator who can perform in that meantime. This is where
Okay.
generally these permissions and all everything are being used, right? So permissions and all everything is being used for that point. Clear, right? So permissions has to be
Yeah.
given. We have to give permissions for all that stuff, right? So here you need to see, for example, permission for a building administrator, right? Is it for members? We have not added any members so far. Only one person is there, where you have to select all this, right? Delete this node,
Okay.
right? For whom you are giving it, right? So are you allowing them to delete the node or not? For example, update project visibility. Who is going to take care of administrator? Is he allowing? Is he allowed to update the project visibility? So each and everything we have to. For example, rename of the team project. Simple thing.
Yeah.
It's not a big
Mm.
thing, right? Rename of the team project. You have to rename it. Even that also you have to add the
Okay.
permission. Either it is to be allowed or denied. So
Mm.
based on the changes you have made, front end you are acting. See, on front end you are working, right? So how you work, back end,
Yeah.
the project settings has to be made by someone. Unless until if not nothing was made so far, we can't work on this.
Okay.
This is where generally these permissions comes into picture, right? Next,
Yeah.
for example, if there is any kind of notifications to be seen, right? Any notifications, if you want to see any notifications, here you have to see, right? So because for what reason notifications is required? If you want to disable it or if you want to enable it, the status. For example, build is completed in reference to the cloud-based point of sale system project. If I want to see the notifications, wherein I have to enable this. If I don't want this notification to see, I simply disable this
Okay.
option.
But these
right?
notifications
For
are basically only the alerts coming in on the dashboard, or it's a email which is
it
getting
is for
sent.
everything. And then alerts will come, even email also you get.
I see.
You get email like this. I'll tell you. I'll show you. There will be some emails I'll return. See, you can see. For example, for Jira, right? This is
Okay.
how generally the notifications I get,
Okay. So
because
this is
this is an email
configured.
ID which is configured in Jira, of course, not in Azure
Okay.
DevOps. It's configured.
Okay.
There I have added. So I'll get an alerts. Regular alerts I'll get. You can see here, right? So regular alerts I have received.
Yeah.
Did you understand this? Right?
Yeah, sure.
At the same time, this is being used in the dashboard also, because alerts can you can see even in
Notification
dashboard.
can come in
Ah,
there. Okay.
yes, dashboards there you can see, and whoever, but make sure you need to that person, that respective person should be a member in the team. Then only the
Yeah.
reason why, if you have seen, whenever I'm adding the team, first of all you have to send in request to them, right? So once they
Okay.
have accepted the request, then we have to continue them. Otherwise, we don't do that, right? That's what
Okay.
generally this notifications is being used for,
Mhm.
right? So notifications
Yeah.
is something relating to that, right? Notifications
The
is this.